there, good morning. Welcome to Coffee with Connie. I'm Connie Fuchsa with Foot Title Group, where we protect your home ownership and make sure that your home closing process is smooth and simple and that you're kept in the loop every step of the way. So this morning I wanted to talk about something that actually came up yesterday to a seminar I went to. As title professionals, we have to go to class and we have to get some information, that the updated information that's going on in our industry in order to keep our licenses current. So it's a requirement for us to be licensed in the state we can do business in, and Foot Title Group and I and all my closers are licensed in Maryland and Virginia. Although a lot of the information we talk about is not state specific, that I talk about on Coffee with Connie. So if you have a question about that, let me know, because a lot of times when we talk about things, there are things that happen all across the United States. But yesterday I was in a class to get some more credits to make sure that my license stays up to date. And one of the things they talked about, they had a gentleman there that was talking about property line surveying. And, you know, we understand the value of that property line survey, but he talked about some things that I thought might be valuable for us to talk about this morning. Now, when you buy a piece of property, the lender used to require that you had a location survey done to prove that the house that you are buying does sit on the property that you're purchasing. And, you know, that sounds pretty basic, but you'd be surprised how many times that either the home or the garage or something that the lender is loaning money against may not totally be on that property, or there may be a right-of-way that goes through it, or someone may have an ownership ability through a certain part of that property. So some things that the lender requires, because they're loaning an awful lot of money and they want to make sure that their loan is secure. Well, some of the rules changed probably about 5 or so years ago, and the title insurance companies agreed to start insuring the lenders as long as the owners signed an affidavit saying that they hadn't done any material changes, etc. You know, there's some things that need to be done. So the lenders were then fine and didn't require a survey be done when someone was purchasing a new piece of property, when the lender was loaning money. So then it became up to the new purchaser, did they want to spend the money and buy a survey? So needless to say, a lot of home buyers, particularly first-time home buyers, really are very specific on where their cash needs to be spent to make sure that they get the most for their money. And so as numbers are being worked out, a lot of times the realtor and or the lender may say you don't have to have a survey done, so you don't really need that expense. And a location survey usually runs around $200 to $300. It depends on where the property is, how big it is, if it's in a subdivision, those types of things. But so it was no longer a requirement in order to get your closing done and to get your loan done. And so a lot of people opted not to have a location survey done anymore. And so unfortunately what happened is there becomes more problems with property owners because there are things that would have been discovered before they went to closing and they could have addressed or had some understanding about, at least anyway. Because a property line drawing, a location drawing, isn't exactly a precise drawing of the property and its improvements, but it gives you a really good idea of things that are located on that property that you might not be able to see. Like, for example, does the fence that's running along the property actually run along the property line, or is it over some on the neighbor's property? Is it over some is the neighbor's fence maybe over on the property you're buying? Is that going to become an issue? Does the neighbor's driveway run through a part of your property? That is very common because of the way that the slope of the property may be and how the driveway had to be designed. Maybe there's an agreement between everybody. Maybe there's not. Maybe it's a gentleman's agreement, and in more rural areas you see this. Or maybe at some point somebody added a laundry room or a garage or a side room onto that house, and it goes over on the neighbor's property, and no one found out about it till the neighbor goes to sell their house. They did have a survey done, and now you bought a piece of property that has a significant issue, and you would have found out if you had a property survey done. So the location drawing is not as precise, and the surveyor doesn't guarantee it, but what they do is draw it from all of the information they can gather from previous ownerships. And where the property lines already are located. They find the markers that are already in there. So it's called a location drawing. It's about $200 to $300 depending on, as I said, where you are. A more involved survey and a much more accurate survey is a boundary line survey. If you're going to do something like a fence that is going around the boundaries of that property, you want to look at a boundary line survey because you want to make sure that you're putting that fence on your property, so you can make sure that you don't have any future problems with what that is. Now, it's significantly more expensive, but it's worth the value to make sure that what you're going to be doing is within the confines of your property, and then you don't end up in a lawsuit with your next door neighbor or any kind of a conflict with them, because let's face it, we all want to get along with our neighbors because they are our neighbors, and you're going to be talking to them, dealing with them all of the time. Plus, it's nice to be nice to your neighbors because then you can look out for each other too. So a boundary line survey is important there. There's a lot of things that can show up. You say, well, gosh, what do I need to spend that money for? What could happen? So as I said, you could be talking about fence lines. You could be talking about access points that the local utilities have to get on and off of the property. You could be talking about a driveway. Does your driveway actually get out to where it needs to for you to get out to the county road? Let's talk about the property. Maybe the person who owns the property has owned it forever, and when they originally purchased it, it said that they owned the road in front of their house, but now that road has become a common road place, and the county took it over, and now the road is actually owned by the county. Maybe it was never actually deeded out, but once someone uses that piece of property openly and honestly for a long period of time, it then affects what your original ownership was. So some things that a survey could find out for you that maybe you don't understand. Where I happen to live, there's some rural area there, and some of those properties don't actually abut the county road. So there's a piece of the driveway that they had to actually get permission from the person who owns the little strip of land in front of their property to make sure that their driveway could go through. So that's something that could show up on your survey that maybe you wouldn't understand, or you wouldn't know, or we wouldn't be able to find out through the title search. Now, that particular thing we could, but we can't tell what's physically happening out at that property because we don't physically go out and inspect the property. And so because of that, when you get your protection, your ownership protection that we talk about so much, which is your title insurance policy, it's not going to protect you about things that would show up on a survey if you don't have a survey done, because we have no way of being able to tell what those things are. So lots of reasons why you should have a survey of the property. Make sure that the improvements are where they say they are. They really are on your property. I did a closing many years ago for a mother of a very good friend of mine who was buying a piece of property that was a house with a small little horse field and a barn, and it was on a private windy gravel road. And when we actually had the survey done, the windy road actually went through the back of her property, and her fence for the horse barn, what actually looked like to be the piece of property, was totally, absolutely not. So if the property was rectangular like this, and you, the house sat in the front, and then, the backyard was fenced in, and there was a barn in the back, it looked very obvious that it was rectangular, and along the side of it went the neighbor's gravel driveway. Well, what really was the case is her property was actually cocked, so everything that looked like it went straight like this went way off her property and was actually on someone else's property. So when we had that survey done, we had to do some work after we had that survey done with the neighbors, granting her the ability to use some of those pieces of property that the surveyor talked about, and would have never been discovered had she not been diligent and decided she wanted to have a survey and make sure that what she thought she was buying, she really was buying. The other thing that it fixed is, maybe that wouldn't come up and you say, well, gosh, she's been using it for a long time. And there is some ability to take some rights to property if you've been using it openly and notoriously for over 20 years, but you have to, it doesn't just happen. You have to go through a process through the court system to be able to do that. And what could happen is the person behind you who actually owns that piece of that property could actually fight to get it back. And so then you'd have to redesign your property, the legal cost extensively, all of that. So when we talk about the cost of the survey, it's really not that expensive when you think of the big picture about, this is the most expensive thing you probably are ever going to buy in your life. You want to make sure that what you're buying is really what you think you're buying. So I recommend that you always, always, always have a survey done when you're purchasing a property, even if it's a location drawing, to get an idea that at least the improvements, the house, the garage, the shed, the big things that you see there are where you think they are. So lots of other things we could talk about with surveys, but I thought I'd just throw a little bit of that out there because this is a thing that gets missed a lot now because you don't have to have one, but it's one of those things. It's like a home inspection. You don't have to have one, but don't you want to make sure that what you're buying isn't going to fall down tomorrow? Same thing. Don't you want to make sure that what you're buying is really what you think you're buying? There's only so much that with title we can actually tell through the land records. So physically examining what really is there and what that seller really owns is really, really important. So hopefully I helped you with a little bit of understanding today. Hey there, Johanna. How are you, girl? Hey, Phil. How are you? Thanks for tuning in. Good morning, Cliff. Thank you guys so much for your time this morning. And thank you all for reaching out to me, asking questions, tuning in. Whether you watch it on the replay or you get to watch us live, let me know if there's things that you want to talk about because there's lots of things that I experience and sometimes I just don't remember that maybe it's something that you guys might want to talk about. Plus, if we talk about something that you think is interesting, hit that share button. That helps me a lot spread the message to people that maybe I don't know that maybe you do. So hopefully I helped you with a little bit of information today. If it spurred some more questions, reach out to me or anybody on our team. If you go to www.foottitlegroup.com, on the About Us page, there's all, contact information for all of our team in both states. They all are licensed and, well, they aren't all licensed. I have license closers in both states, but all of them are very well versed in both states and can answer all of those kinds of questions for you. So there's also lots of resources on our website, including the new feature to explain to you about title insurance and that it isn't something that's just a modern day problem. There's a discussion on there about President Lincoln and how a problem happened to him and to how title insurance was effective. So hopefully that helped you with maybe a question that you had, or maybe it spurred a question for you. And I hope you got some information. Thank you so much for tuning in to Coffee with Connie. I'm Connie Fuchsa with Foot Title Group, where we protect your home ownership. Have a fabulous day, everybody, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Bye-bye.